It all started with the legs. In an office populated almost entirely by women, it was impossible not to notice them. They were an ever-shifting landscape of nylon, silk, and sheer fabrics. The whisper of a stocking-clad calf brushing past my desk, the subtle sheen of pantyhose under the fluorescent lights, the way a sleek pump accentuated the curve of an ankle. These were the details that broke the monotony of spreadsheets and financial reports. I was an accountant, a man of numbers and quiet observation. My world was supposed to be black and white, debits and credits, but my gaze was constantly drawn to the subtle, elegant poetry of a woman's leg and hosiery. I never thought of it as a perversion. To me, it was an aesthetic appreciation, like admiring a painting or a sculpture. I saw the artistry in the choice of denier, the subtle difference between a suntan and a nude shade, the confidence a pair of sharp heels gave the wearer. I was a connoisseur, a silent admirer. I kept my observations to myself, a harmless secret in the sterile environment of sterling financial services. My mistake was getting careless. It was a Tuesday afternoon, the post-lunch lull when the office hummed with a sleepy energy. Jessica from marketing was standing by the water cooler, talking to Amanda from sales. Jessica had exceptional legs, long and slender, and today they were encased in a pair of sheer black pantyhose that seemed to be made of pure shadow. She shifted her weight, and the light caught the elegant line of her calf muscle. It was perfect. Without thinking, I lifted my phone, framing the shot discreetly from behind my monitor. I wasn't going to do anything with the picture. It was just a moment I wanted to capture, a snapshot of that quiet, unassuming beauty. I zoomed in slightly, trying to get the texture of the weave just right. I have clear evidence that you are obsessed with your colleague's legs and pantyhose. Nathan, now, how do you intend to explain this? The voice was ice. It sliced through my concentration and sent a jolt of pure terror through my veins. I snapped my head up, my phone clattering onto the desk. Standing over my cubicle was Ms. Sterling. Rebecca Sterling was the Director of Human Resources. She was a woman who didn't just walk into a room. She conquered it. Tall, with sharp, intelligent eyes and hair the color of expensive dark chocolate pulled back into a severe but elegant bun. She commanded absolute authority. She was always impeccably dressed in power suits that were both feminine and intimidating. Today, she wore a charcoal gray skirt suit. And yes, I couldn't help but notice. Her own legs were flawlessly sheathed in a pair of impossibly sheer, matte black pantyhose. She held her phone out, the screen glowing. On it was a crystal-clear photo of me, my own phone aimed directly at Jessica's oblivious legs. My face was a mask of pathetic, slack-jawed focus. My world collapsed. I can't explain, I stammered, my voice a dry croak. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. Can you? She asked, one perfectly sculpted eyebrow arching. Her voice was low, for my ears only, but it carried the weight of a guillotine. Because from where I stand, this looks like workplace harassment, invasion of privacy, grounds for immediate termination. Do you know how quickly I could have you escorted from this building, Nathan? Please, I whispered, my eyes darting around the office. No one else seemed to have noticed. The gentle hum of productivity continued, oblivious to the utter implosion of my life. It's not what it looks like. I admire the aesthetics. Ms. Sterling let out a short, humorless laugh. The aesthetics, an interesting choice of words. She pocketed her phone. My office. Now. The walk to her office was the longest 10 yards of my life. Every footstep echoed in my ears. I felt hundreds of eyes on my back, even though I knew no one was watching. Her office was at the corner of the floor, a glass-walled cage from which she observed her domain. She swept inside and gestured for me to take the chair opposite her massive mahogany desk. The door clicked shut behind me, sealing my fate. She sat, her movements precise and controlled. She folded her hands on the desk and fixed me with a gaze that stripped me bare. You've been with this company for 5 years, Nathan. You're a competent accountant. Quiet, reliable, never caused a single problem, until today. What a disappointment. Miss Sterling, I swear, I've never— Don't lie to me, she cut in, her voice sharp as broken glass. I've seen you looking. You're not as subtle as you think. You stare when you think no one is watching. Your eyes linger a little too long. I've been aware of it for months. This is just the first time I've had concrete proof. Shame washed over me, hot and suffocating. She knew. For months, I felt like a bug under a microscope. So, we have two options, she continued, her tone becoming businesslike, as if she were discussing quarterly earnings. Option 1, I fire you, effective immediately. I will have to file a report, of course. Termination for cause. It will follow you, Nathan. Finding another job in this field will be difficult. I swallowed hard, the taste of ashes in my mouth, my career, my livelihood, gone. Or, she said, pausing for dramatic effect, there is option 2. We can call it corrective action, an experimental therapy, if you will, to help you understand a different perspective. I looked at her, confused. Therapy? Of a sort, she said, a faint, unreadable smile playing on her lips. You seem to have a deep fascination with what it's like for a woman to wear these aesthetics. I propose you gain that understanding firsthand. You will continue to work here, at your full salary, but you will do so under my direct and personal supervision. You will follow my instructions to the letter, without question or complaint. If you do, this incident disappears. If you refuse at any point, we revert to option 1. My mind reeled. What was she proposing I don't understand? What kind of instructions? Without a word, Ms. Sterling swiveled in her chair and opened a low filing cabinet. It wasn't filled with files. It was neatly organized with boxes of what looked like office supplies, but they weren't. She pulled out a small, flat cardboard package. She slid it across the polished surface of the desk. It stopped directly in front of me. The brand name was Nude Gleam. The photo on the front showed the disembodied, airbrushed legs of a mannequin, glowing with an unnatural sheen. It was a pair of pantyhose. Your therapy begins now, Nathan, she said, her voice a silky whisper. I want you to put these on. I stared at the box, then back at her face. This had to be a joke, a cruel, twisted test, here now. Right here, right now, she confirmed, her eyes glinting. The door is locked. No one will disturb us. I want to see just how much you appreciate the aesthetics. My hands were trembling. This was insane. It was humiliating. It was 100 different kinds of wrong, but the alternative was professional ruin. The words termination for cause echoed in my skull, with a feeling of profound dread. I picked up the box and my fingers fumbled with the cellophane. Take your pants and shoes off, she commanded, her voice leaving no room for argument. Moving like a robot. I bent down and untied my boring, sensible dress shoes. I placed them neatly by the chair. I unbuckled my belt and unzipped my trousers. My hands shook so badly I could barely manage it. I slid them down, my corduroy-clad legs feeling clumsy and exposed. I stood there in my socks and boxer shorts, my face burning with a shame so intense it felt like a physical fever. Ms. Sterling watched my every move, her expression a cool, clinical mask. Opened the package. I tore open the cardboard and a delicate, almost weightless bundle of nylon spilled into my hand. It was a pale beige color, impossibly sheer. It felt cool and slippery to the touch, like a second skin. The smell was faint, a mixture of new fabric and something vaguely floral. Go on, she prompted. I sat on the edge of the chair, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I had watched women do this 1,000 times. A graceful, fluid motion. My attempt was anything but. I bunched up one leg of the pantyhose, a clumsy wad of fabric in my fist, and tried to get my foot through the opening. The material was so delicate I was terrified of ripping it. My toes caught. I fumbled. Point your toes, she instructed, her voice laced with a sliver of impatience. And for God's sake, be careful with your fingernails. I took a deep breath and tried again. This time, my foot slid through. The nylon tube began to unfurl up my leg. The sensation was electrifying. It was a feeling I had no words for. The fabric was cool, smooth, and incredibly intimate as it slid over my skin. It clung to every contour of my calf, my knee, my thigh. It was a gentle, constant pressure, a whisper against my leg hair that made every nerve ending stand at attention. It was both alien and, in a deeply unsettling way, strangely pleasant. I pulled the first leg all the way up to my hip, my breath catching in my throat. I looked down at my own leg, now transformed. It looked different, smoother, more defined. The pale nylon evened out my skin tone, giving it a subtle, polished glow. It was my leg, but it was also not my leg. With slightly more confidence, I started on the second one. The process was the same. The sensations just as new and overwhelming. Finally, I stood up and pulled the waistband up around my hips. The pantyhose settled against my skin, a delicate, form-fitting cage from my waist to my toes. I stood awkwardly in the center of her office, clad in only my boxer shorts and a pair of nude gleam pantyhose. I felt utterly exposed, mortified beyond words, but beneath the tidal wave of shame, a tiny, treacherous spark of something else flickered to life, a flicker of intense, undeniable curiosity. My legs felt sleek. The air from the vent felt different against the nylon. When I shifted my weight, my thighs slid against each other with a soft, sibilant whisper. Ms. Sterling rose from her chair and walked slowly around me, inspecting her handiwork. Her proximity was unnerving. I could smell her perfume, a subtle, expensive scent. "Interesting," she murmured, her eyes fixed on my legs. "You have a good shape for them, better than I expected." She stopped in front of me, her gaze meeting mine. The clinical mask was gone, replaced by a look of triumphant control. "This is just the beginning. Nathan, this is your new reality. You will wear these for the rest of the day, under your trousers. You will get used to the feeling. Tomorrow, your real lessons begin." She gestured to my discarded pants on the floor. "Get dressed, and not a word of this to anyone. Our little arrangement stays between us. Is that understood?" "Yes, Ms. Sterling," I mumbled, my voice barely audible. Pulling my trousers back on over the pantyhose was another surreal experience. The rough fabric of the pants slid over the slick nylon instead of catching on my leg hair. The feeling of the secret layer against my skin was a constant, maddening reminder of what had just happened. As I walked back to my desk, each step was a new discovery. The world hadn't changed, but my experience of it had been fundamentally altered. I sat down, the nylon of my thighs compressing against the chair. I could feel every seam, every subtle pressure. I was still Nathan, the quiet accountant, but I was Nathan wearing a secret that was clinging to my skin, whispering of the terrifying, uncertain future that Ms. Sterling had just laid out for me. And God help me, a small, shameful part of me was already wondering what tomorrow would bring. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I could feel the ghost of the nylon against my skin, the cool, clinical stare of Ms. Sterling, the profound humiliation of standing in her office. I took the pantyhose off the second I got home, stuffing them into the bottom of my trash can, as if they were radioactive. But I couldn't throw away the feeling. It lingered, a strange combination of shame and a prickling, electric curiosity. The next morning, I dressed for work with a sense of impending doom. I chose my most boring, conservative suit, a baggy charcoal gray outfit that I hoped would make me invisible. It was a foolish hope. The moment I stepped into the office, a notification pinged on my computer, an instant message from Rebecca Sterling. "My office, bring your coffee." My heart sank. With trembling hands, I poured a coffee I knew I wouldn't be able to drink and made the grim pilgrimage back to her corner office. She was already at her desk, looking as powerful and serene as ever. Today she wore a deep navy blue dress that highlighted her hourglass figure. "Good morning, Nathan," she said, her tone deceptively pleasant. "Did you sleep well?" "Fine, thank you," I lied. "Good." She gestured toward a large, elegant gift bag standing by her desk. It was from a high-end department store. "I did a little shopping for you last night. I believe this is your size." I stared at the bag, my mind refusing to process what was happening. She couldn't possibly mean. "You didn't think we were going to hide your progress under those dreadful trousers forever, did you?" she asked, a smirk playing on her lips. "The point of this exercise, Nathan, is exposure. It's about understanding the perspective you've been so fixated on. These legs can't be hidden anymore." She stood up and pulled the contents from the bag. First, a black pencil skirt, made of a fabric with a subtle, expensive-looking texture. It was high-waisted and brutally form-fitting. Next, a pair of black, closed-toe pumps with a low, sturdy-looking heel, not a stiletto, but a heel nonetheless. And finally, Another package of pantyhose. This time, they were sheer black. The restroom is down the hall. I expect to see you back here in 10 minutes. Fully compliant, she said, laying the items on the visitor's chair. Her message was clear. This wasn't a request. My body moved on autopilot. I picked up the clothes and the shoebox, the plastic of the pantyhose package crinkling in my grip. I walked to the executive restroom, a single occupancy affair that was thankfully empty. I locked the door and leaned against it, my head spinning. This was happening. This was real. Dressing was an exercise in fumbling humiliation. The pantyhose went on first. The black nylon was even more transformative than the nude. It made my legs look longer, sleeker, and entirely alien to me. Then came the skirt. I had to suck in my stomach to zip it up. It was tight, unbelievably tight. It hugged my hips and backside, restricting my movement in a way I had never experienced. I couldn't take a full stride. I was forced into smaller, more deliberate steps. Finally, the shoes. My size 10 feet looked monstrously large crammed into the feminine pumps. I wobbled as I stood up, my ankles screaming in protest. The heels forced my weight forward, changed my posture, and made me feel ridiculously tall and unstable. I looked at myself in the full-length mirror and a stranger stared back, a clumsy, broad-shouldered man stuffed into women's clothes. The sight was so pathetic it was almost comical, but I felt no urge to laugh. All I felt was a cold, creeping dread. 10 minutes to the second, I knocked on Ms. Sterling's door. "Come in." I opened the door and shuffled inside, my every movement awkward and self-conscious. The low heels clicked uncertainly on the floor. Ms. Sterling looked me up and down, her eyes lingering on my legs. A slow, satisfied smile spread across her face. "Much better," she said. "Now, your workday begins. Go to your desk, Nathan. And try to walk with a little more grace. You're not trudging through mud." Walking back to my cubicle was the most terrifying experience of my life. The office, once a place of anonymous comfort, was now a stage, and I was the unwilling star of a freak show. The pencil skirt forced my hips to sway slightly, a motion that felt both foreign and deeply embarrassing. The click-clack of my heels announced my approach, turning heads as I went. The reaction started almost immediately. A few stifled giggles from the younger women in marketing, whispers that died the moment I looked in their direction. Jessica, the woman whose legs I had photographed, stared at me with wide, disbelieving eyes before quickly looking away, a blush creeping up her neck. I finally made it to the safety of my cubicle and sank into my chair, the tight skirt creaking in protest, but there was no safety to be had. My legs were on full display beneath the desk, encased in shimmering black nylon. The first direct comment came from Amanda, who had a cubicle across from mine. She was usually friendly, with a kind face and a motherly demeanor. She leaned over the partition, a look of genuine astonishment on her face. "Nathan, oh my God, is this for a charity thing?" "Something like that," I mumbled, refusing to meet her eyes, focusing intently on my computer screen as if the fate of the world depended on it. A few minutes later, Mark from ET, one of the few other men on the floor, walked by. He did a comical double take. His jaw dropping open, he just stood there and stared, a stupid grin spreading across his face, before shaking his head and walking away, laughing to himself. Each snicker, each stare, was like a physical blow. But the most cutting remark came from Jessica. She walked past my desk, pretending to be on her way to the printer. As she passed, she slowed down, her eyes raking over my legs. She leaned in conspiratorially and whispered, just loud enough for me to hear, "Wow, Nathan, your legs are even smoother than mine. You must shave." She walked away, leaving her words hanging in the air like poison. It was meant to be an insult, a way to emasculate me further. And it worked. I felt a surge of hot, bitter shame. I wanted the floor to swallow me whole. But then, something else happened. Deep beneath the layers of humiliation, a strange, unwelcome thought surfaced. A tiny, perverse part of my brain seized on the word smoother. It replayed the comment, not as an insult, but as a compliment. My heart gave a traitorous little flutter. I risked a glance down at my own legs. Under the fluorescent lights, the black nylon was doing its work. The skirt forced me to sit with my knees together, creating a line I'd never noticed before. They did look smooth. They looked elegant. The thought was horrifying. And I immediately tried to crush it, to bury it under the weight of my shame, but it was there, a tiny seed of vanity, planted in the most toxic soil imaginable. Maybe I don't look as ridiculous as I thought. I spent the rest of the day in a state of hyper-awareness. I was conscious of the constricting skirt with every breath, the pinch of the heels on my feet, and most of all, the constant, silky caress of the pantyhose against my skin. The feeling of my thighs sliding against each other in the sheer fabric was a continuous, distracting sensation. Ms. Sterling seemed to have eyes everywhere. Whenever I started to slump in my chair or cross my legs in a masculine way, a feat the skirt made nearly impossible anyway, an instant message would pop up on my screen. Sit up straight, Nathan. Ladies don't slouch. Keep your knees together, it's more becoming. She was conditioning me, reshaping me from afar. I was a puppet, and she was pulling every string. I felt utterly powerless, trapped in this bizarre nightmare of her creation. When 5 o'clock finally arrived, I had never been more relieved to leave the office. I hobbled out, my feet aching, my pride in tatters. But as I walked to my car, the strange thought returned. The world hadn't ended. I had survived the whispers and the stares, and a comment meant to destroy me had instead sparked something new and confusing inside my mind. I still hated this. I hated Miss Sterling. I hated the humiliation. But as I drove home, I couldn't stop thinking about Jessica's words. And for the first time, I wondered what my legs might look like if they were actually smooth. The question terrified me more than anything else that had happened all day. The next few weeks fell into a surreal and terrifying routine. The skirts and heels became my mandatory work uniform. Ms. Sterling had an impeccable and cruel sense of style. Some days it was a gray pencil skirt with nude pantyhose, other days a navy A-line skirt with off-black hose. Each outfit was designed for maximum exposure, for a complete erasure of the man I used to be in the workplace. The office environment slowly shifted from outright shock to a kind of weary, gossipy acceptance. I became a fixture, a strange piece of living art. I learned to tune out the whispers, to walk in the cursed heels without wobbling, to sit for hours with my knees pressed firmly together. I was adapting, I was surviving, and that, in itself, was horrifying. But Ms. Sterling was not content with mere survival. Her project, as she sometimes called it, was escalating. Her control began to bleed into the hours after work. It started with a summons to her office one Thursday evening. Long after everyone else had gone home, the sky outside her window was a bruised purple. "Your presentation is lacking, Nathan," she said, circling her desk. "You wear the clothes, but you don't inhabit them. The illusion is incomplete. We need to work on the details." From her magical filing cabinet, she produced a small, expensive-looking makeup bag. "We'll start simply," she announced. That night, she taught me, or rather, forced me to apply a light foundation, a coat of mascara, and a sheer nude lipstick. I sat frozen in my chair as she guided my trembling hand, her fingers cool and firm on mine. The feeling of the makeup brush on my skin was alien. The mascara wand tickling my eyelashes made me flinch. The waxy, faintly scented lipstick felt like a brand on my mouth. "There," she said, holding up a small hand mirror. "See, it just evens out your complexion, makes your eyes stand out. It's about polish, professionalism." I looked at the face in the mirror. It was mine, but subtly altered, softer. The harsh angles seemed less pronounced. The person looking back at me was prettier. The word made me feel sick. The next step came a few days later. Nail polish, a pale, almost translucent pink. She painted my nails herself, one by one, with a steady, practiced hand. "Your hands are on display all day on the keyboard," she reasoned. "They need to match the rest of the picture." The true turning point, however, was the day she introduced the final pieces of the puzzle. Again, it was after hours. The office was silent and dark, save for the lamp on her desk, which cast the room in an intimate, conspiratorial glow. She placed a box on the desk between us. Inside was a simple, seamless bralette and 2 teardrop-shaped pieces of silicone. They were cool and disconcertingly heavy in my palm. "A woman's silhouette is defined by her curves," she stated, as if delivering a lecture. Your frame is angular, masculine. We need to soften it. This will help. My protests died in my throat. I knew they were useless, under her watchful eye. I went to her private bathroom and put them on. The bralette was tight across my chest. The silicone forms, or fillets as she called them, felt like strange, cold parasites against my skin. I tucked them into the bralette, and when I looked in the mirror, I saw the gentle, undeniable swell of small breasts under my silk blouse. That was the moment I broke. The reflection in the mirror was a monster, a grotesque parody, a man twisted and deformed into a crude caricature of a woman. It wasn't me. It couldn't be me. A choked sob escaped my lips. The tears came hot and fast, blurring the face of the stranger in the mirror. I hunched over the sink, my body shaking with a grief so profound I didn't know where it came from. I was mourning myself. I was mourning the simple, unremarkable man I had been. The bathroom door opened softly. Ms. Sterling stood in the doorway, her expression uncharacteristically gentle. She didn't mock me. She just watched me cry for a long moment. "Do you want to stop, Nathan?" she asked, her voice quiet. Her question hung in the air, a lifeline I hadn't expected. This was it, my chance to end the nightmare. All I had to do was say yes. Yes, I want to stop. Yes, I'll take my chances with being fired. Yes, I want my life back. The word formed on my lips, yes, but it wouldn't come out. A strange, complex paralysis had seized me. Part of it was fear, the terror of unemployment and disgrace, but another part, a deeper, more insidious part, hesitated for a different reason, a part that was morbidly fascinated by this strange new world, a part that had felt a flicker of pride at Jessica's backhanded compliment, a part that had secretly admired the smooth, sleek line of my own nylon-clad leg. That part of me was curious to see what came next. My silence was my answer. It stretched for an eternity. I couldn't say yes, but I couldn't bring myself to say no, either. A slow, triumphant smile touched Miss Sterling's lips. She had won. She knew it. She had pushed me to the edge. And I had chosen to stay in the cage. She stepped forward and gently tilted my chin up, forcing me to look at our reflections in the mirror together. Me, a tear-streaked mess with a budding, artificial bust. Her, a vision of cool, feminine power. "Don't cry," she said softly. "The girl in the mirror is prettier than you think. You just can't see it yet." She took out her phone. The flash was blinding. She captured me at my most vulnerable tear tracks on my foundation. My eyes red and swollen. The evidence of my transformation undeniable. The photo was a new weapon in her arsenal, a new chain to bind me to her. "I think," she said, looking at the image on her screen with satisfaction, "it's time we gave her a name. Nathan doesn't suit her. She looks more like a Natasha." From that day on, something shifted inside me. The war was no longer just between me and Ms. Sterling. It was between Nathan and Natasha. The resistance I had clung to began to crumble, worn down by the daily rituals and the slow, creeping acceptance that this was my life now. I was still terrified, but a new emotion began to weave its way through the fear, a dark, thrilling excitement. When Ms. Sterling would compliment me, "That color brings out your eyes, Natasha," or "You're finally learning to walk in those heels." My face would flush with shame, but my heart would beat a little faster. I was her project, her creation, and her approval, as twisted as it was, became something I started to crave. The man in the mirror was a weeping, pathetic creature, but the girl she was building, I was starting to wonder if maybe, just maybe, Ms. Sterling was right. Maybe Natasha was stronger and prettier than I could ever have imagined. The transition from unwilling victim to active participant was not a sudden earthquake, but a slow tectonic shift. It happened in a series of small, private surrenders, moments when no one was watching, when the choice was entirely my own. It started with shaving my legs. After weeks of wearing pantyhose, the feeling of the nylon catching on my leg hair had become a constant, irritating reminder of the masculinity I was supposed to be shedding. Jessica's taunt, "Your legs are even smoother than mine," echoed in my head. One Saturday morning, I found myself standing in the pharmacy, staring at a wall of women's razors and shaving creams. My heart pounded with the fear of being seen, of being judged. But the urge was stronger than the fear. Back home, in the privacy of my bathroom, I went through the strange, new ritual, the warm water, the floral scent of the shaving gel, the careful, precise scrape of the razor. When I was done, my legs were smooth, pale, and completely unfamiliar. I ran my hand over my calf, feeling the slick, soft skin. It was the leg of a stranger. When I slid on a pair of sheer pantyhose over my newly bare skin, the sensation was a revelation. It was pure bliss. The nylon glided on without a single snag, clinging to my legs like water. The feeling was so clean, so sleek, so right. It was the first time an act associated with my transformation had brought me genuine, unadulterated pleasure. It was a secret I kept for myself. A small step taken not because Ms. Sterling forced me to, but because I wanted to. The next surrender happened online. I began to run low on the pantyhose Ms. Sterling had provided. The thought of buying them in a store was still too mortifying to contemplate. So, late one night, I found myself browsing hosiery websites. The variety was staggering. Different deniers, finishes, colors, brands. It was no longer a passive observer. I was a consumer. I added a few pairs of ultra sheer, 10 denier pantyhose to my cart, thinner and more delicate than anything Ms. Sterling had given me. Clicking confirm purchase felt like a monumental betrayal of the man I was supposed to be, and a quiet pledge of allegiance to the woman I was becoming. Slowly, Natasha began to bleed into my private life. After work, I'd come home and, instead of immediately ripping off the restrictive clothes, I'd find myself lingering in them. I started to experiment. I'd try on one of the skirts without the compulsion of Ms. Sterling's orders. I'd stand in front of my bedroom mirror, practicing the posture she'd drilled into me, turning this way and that, observing how the fabric draped over the silicone-enhanced curves. I was studying a stranger, learning her lines and angles, until one day I realized I wasn't studying a stranger at all. I was studying myself. The ultimate confirmation of this shift came during one of our after-hours sessions. We were in her office, and she was critiquing my posture. "Nathan is still in there," she said, circling me like a shark. "I can see him in the way you hold your shoulders, the way you hesitate." She stopped in front of me and looked me directly in the eye. "Nathan is disappearing. Isn't he soon? There will only be Natasha." I looked at our reflections in the dark glass of her window. She stood behind me, a powerful, shadowy figure. In front of her was my reflection, a woman in a smart business dress, with styled hair thanks to a wig she had introduced last week, subtle makeup, and long, nylon-clad legs. And for the first time, I didn't see a man in a costume. I saw her. "Maybe," I heard myself whisper, the voice sounding distant and unfamiliar. Maybe Natasha was always there. A slow, satisfied smile spread across Ms. Sterling's face. It wasn't the cruel smile of a tormentor anymore. It was the proud smile of a mentor. Her methods began to change. The harsh commands softened into guidance. She taught me how to sit properly, not as a punishment, but as a lesson in elegance. "Cross your legs at the ankle, not the knee," she'd instruct softly, her hand gently guiding my leg into the correct position. "It's more modest and elongates the line. Now, place your hands lightly on your lap, one over the other. Yes, just like that." Her touch was no longer just a display of power. It was instructional, almost intimate. One evening, we were in the photocopy room, collating documents for a big report. It was late, the building silent around us. I was wearing a particularly lovely pair of sheer gray pantyhose that made my legs look like they were carved from smoke. I bent down to retrieve a dropped paper, and as I stood up, I found myself face to face with her. She was closer than she had ever been before. Her eyes searched my face, then dropped to my lips. The air grew thick, charged with an energy that was entirely new. The lines between warden and prisoner, teacher and student, had blurred into something unidentifiable. "You've learned so much, Natasha," she murmured, her voice a low thrum. She leaned in, and for a heart-stopping second, I thought she was going to kiss me. Her lips brushed against mine, a feather-light touch, hesitant and exploratory. It wasn't a kiss of passion, but of possession. It was a seal, a final branding of her creation. It sent a shockwave through my entire body, a confusing jumble of fear and a deep, unexpected longing. She pulled back just as quickly, her expression unreadable. "The reports won't file themselves," she said, her voice back to its usual businesslike tone. But the moment lingered. The boundary had been crossed. I was no longer just her subordinate, her experiment. I was something else to her, and she was something else to me. I was beginning to enjoy the feeling of the clothes, the sensation of the makeup on my skin, the gentle sway of the skirt as I walked. The person I was in the office poised, meticulous, and feminine was starting to feel more real than the confused, lonely man who lived in my apartment. I was beginning to crave the structure, the rules, the transformation. The fear was still there, a constant hum beneath the surface, but it was now mingled with a powerful, addictive pleasure. I was afraid of what I was becoming, but I was even more afraid of stopping. Natasha had awakened, and I didn't know how to put her back to sleep. I wasn't even sure I wanted to. The email landed in every senior manager's inbox like a bomb. A team of auditors from the corporate head office in New York would be arriving in 2 weeks for a full-scale operational review. It was an event that sent waves of panic through the entire office. For me, it was a tsunami of pure terror. These weren't colleagues who had slowly grown accustomed to my situation. These were strangers, powerful executives who would see a man in a dress and ask questions. Questions Miss Sterling couldn't easily answer. My carefully constructed, fragile world was about to be shattered. I rushed to her office, my heart hammering in my chest. "What are we going to do?" I asked, forgetting all the lessons in poise and calm she had drilled into me. She looked up from her computer, the picture of tranquility. "We are not going to do anything, Natasha," she said calmly. "You are going to impress them." I stared at her, uncomprehending. "They'll see me. They'll fire us both." "No, they won't," she countered, her confidence unshakable. "They won't see Nathan, the nervous accountant. They will be introduced to Natasha, our newest and brightest financial analyst, a sharp, elegant, and incredibly competent woman who has all the quarterly figures at her fingertips." This was her plan, not to hide me, but to push me further into the light than ever before, to complete the transformation and present it as fact. It was the ultimate gamble. "I can't," I whispered, sinking into the chair opposite her. "I'm not her, not really, it's just clothes." Ms. Sterling rose and came around the desk, kneeling before me so our eyes were level. It was the most disarming gesture she had ever made. "It stopped being just clothes a long time ago. And you know it," she said softly, but with an iron certainty. "You have been living as her, breathing as her, for months. Nathan is a ghost. Natasha is real. I've seen her. Now, you need to see her too. This isn't a punishment anymore. This is a debut." The 2 weeks leading up to the audit were a blur of intense preparation. Ms. Sterling became my personal director, coach, and stylist. We spent every evening after work perfecting Natasha's persona. She bought me a new wardrobe, not just work skirts, but elegant, professional dresses, tailored blouses, and a sophisticated trench coat. We upgraded from the cheap wig to a high-quality, human hair one that fell in soft, dark waves around my shoulders. She drilled me on the financial reports, but also on etiquette, how to shake hands firmly but gracefully, how to make eye contact, how to modulate my voice to be confident but feminine. It was a complete overhaul, a top-to-bottom reimagining of who I was. The morning the auditors were due to arrive, I came into the office 2 hours early. Miss Sterling was already there, waiting for me in her office. Laid out on her sofa was the outfit she had chosen for the day, a chic, sleeveless sheath dress in a deep burgundy color, a pair of classic black patent leather pumps with a modest 3-inch heel, and a box containing a new pair of ultra-sheer, nude pantyhose. "Today is the day, Natasha," she said simply. "No mistakes." The preparation was a ritual. I showered and shaved meticulously, my skin smooth and ready. I slid on the delicate pantyhose, the sheer nylon feeling like a second, perfect skin. I stepped into the dress, the fabric clinging to my curves in a way that felt both powerful and natural. For the first time, the silicone breast forms didn't feel like a foreign attachment. They simply felt like a part of my body. Then came the makeup. Ms. Sterling applied it herself, her touch light and precise. Foundation, a subtle smoky eye, a sweep of blush, and a confident rose-colored lipstick. As she worked, she spoke in a low, almost hypnotic voice. Forget Nathan, he was weak. He was afraid. Natasha is confident. She is intelligent. She belongs here. Finally, she placed the wig on my head, adjusting the dark waves to frame my face perfectly. She stepped back and turned me to face the full-length mirror on the back of her door. I gasped. The person staring back at me was not a man in a costume. The lines were no longer blurred. The awkwardness was gone. Before me stood a woman, a complete, total, and surprisingly beautiful woman. Her eyes, my eyes, held a confidence I had never felt before. Her posture was erect and graceful. The dress fit her perfectly. She looked like she belonged in this office, in this life. In that moment, standing there in the quiet dawn of the office, the final wall inside me crumbled. The last vestiges of Nathan, the terrified accountant, dissolved and blew away like dust. All that was left was her. I reached up and touched the cool glass of the mirror, my painted nails resting on the cheek of my reflection. I started, my voice catching in my throat. I cleared it, and when I spoke again, the voice was softer, clearer. I am Natasha. Ms. Sterling came to stand behind me, placing her hands on my shoulders. Our eyes met in the mirror. And Natasha, she said, her voice filled with a fierce pride, is going to own this day. And I did. When the auditors arrived, Miss Sterling introduced me as Natasha Sterling. Her sharp new analyst, she had given me her own last name as the final touch. I shook their hands, my grip firm. I looked them in the eye. I led the presentation on the quarterly financials, my voice clear and steady. I answered their questions with a precision and insight that even surprised me. Nathan's analytical brain was still there, but it was now filtered through Natasha's poise and confidence. They didn't see a man in a dress. They saw a competent professional. They saw a woman. Throughout the day, I received compliments on my sharp analysis and my elegant presentation. Mr. Davies, the head auditor, a stern man in his late 50s, even remarked to Ms. Sterling, "Your new analyst is a real asset, incredibly sharp." The feeling was intoxicating. It was a validation more powerful than any I had ever known. I wasn't being praised in spite of my appearance. I was being praised as a whole person, a person I had just fully met that morning. The fear was gone, replaced by an exhilarating sense of rightness. This was who I was meant to be. The auditors left late in the afternoon, thoroughly impressed. The office was buzzing with relief and success. I walked back to Ms. Sterling's office, the click of my heels on the floor no longer a sound of shame, but a rhythm of confidence. She was waiting for me, a rare, genuine smile on her face. She held up a glass of champagne. "To Natasha," she said, her voice soft. I took the glass, my hand steady. "To Natasha," I repeated. We touched glasses, the crystal ringing out in the quiet office. The man who had been dragged into this office months ago, weeping with shame as he pulled on his first pair of pantyhose, was gone. He had been a prisoner in his own life. But Natasha was free. The experiment was over. My new life had just begun. Months passed, and the seasons turned outside Ms. Sterling's office window. Inside, the climate had settled into a new, stable normal. Nathan was a distant memory, a name on old paperwork that had been discreetly archived. Natasha, on the other hand, was a fixture. She was no longer the new analyst, but a respected and integral part of the financial team. The office gossip had long since died down, replaced by the mundane reality that Natasha was simply Natasha. She was the one who could untangle the most complex spreadsheets, the one who always had a spare pair of pantyhose in her desk drawer for a colleague in need, the one who could walk in 4-inch heels all day without a single complaint. My life had completely bifurcated, at work, and increasingly in my personal time. I was Natasha. I had a new wardrobe, a new way of speaking, a new way of carrying myself. The hesitation was gone, replaced by a fluid, feminine confidence that felt more natural than anything Nathan had ever managed. The fear and shame that had once consumed me had been replaced by a quiet pride in the woman I had become. My relationship with Rebecca, she had insisted I drop the Ms. Sterling months ago, had also evolved. The master and servant dynamic had softened into a strange, powerful partnership. We were allies, co-conspirators in the creation and maintenance of Natasha Sterling. We often had lunch together, and our after-work sessions continued, though they were now more collaborative than coercive. They were strategy meetings, discussions about wardrobe choices for upcoming presentations, or sometimes, just quiet moments of shared understanding over a glass of wine in her office. She was my creator, my mentor, and my closest confidant. The only person in the world who knew the entire truth. One rainy afternoon, Rebecca and I were sitting in her office, looking over the application files for a new junior accountant position. The office was quiet, the rhythmic drumming of rain against the glass a soothing backdrop to our work. As we sifted through the resumes, a new employee, a young man named Kevin, walked past the glass wall of her office. He was hired a few weeks ago for the mailroom. He was awkward, with slumped shoulders and eyes that always seemed to be fixed on the floor. He rarely spoke to anyone as he passed. He risked a quick, furtive glance towards Amanda's desk. She was wearing a particularly eye-catching pair of patterned stockings. And for a split second, Kevin's gaze lingered on her legs before he caught himself and scurried away, his face flushed with embarrassment. It was a tiny moment, one that almost no one would have noticed, but Rebecca and I both saw it. We exchanged a look, a silent communication that passed between us with perfect clarity. Rebecca leaned back in her chair, a thoughtful, predatory gleam in her eyes that I hadn't seen in a long time. It was the same look she'd had the day she confronted me at my cubicle. A shiver, not of fear, but of recognition, ran down my spine. She turned her gaze from the hallway to me. She studied my face, my perfectly applied makeup, the simple gold necklace at my throat, the elegant line of my legs crossed at the ankle beneath the desk. She smiled, a slow, knowing smile. "He has the same look in his eyes that you used to have," she whispered, her voice a low, intimate murmur. That mixture of fascination and fear, the look of a secret admirer. My heart gave a strange little flutter. I thought back to the man I used to be, the quiet, lonely accountant who found beauty in things he didn't think he was allowed to want. I saw his reflection in that shy, nervous boy in the hallway. Rebecca turned to her computer. Her painted nails clicked softly on the keyboard as she opened her email client and composed a new message. The subject line was simple: direct request for a private meeting. The recipient was Kevin. She swiveled in her chair and opened the same low filing cabinet from which my own transformation had begun. It was still neatly stocked. She reached in and pulled out a brand new, unopened package of pantyhose. It was Nude Gleam, the very same brand she had first forced upon me. She placed the box on the corner of her desk, a silent, potent symbol of what was to come. She looked at me, one eyebrow arched in a silent question, inviting me into the conspiracy. The old Nathan would have been horrified. He would have felt pity for the boy, a desire to warn him. But I was not Nathan anymore. I thought of the shame and terror of that first day, and then I thought of the exhilarating pride I felt when the auditors had praised my work. I thought of the clumsy, miserable man I had been, and the confident, elegant woman I was now. Rebecca hadn't just punished me, she had liberated me. She had seen something in me, a nascent femininity I hadn't even known existed, and had ruthlessly, brilliantly, lovingly carved it out. I looked from the box of pantyhose to Rebecca's waiting eyes, and I gave a small, subtle nod. A slow smile spread across my face, mirroring hers. The cycle was not just repeating, it was evolving, and this time, I would not be the subject of the experiment. This time, I would be a part of it. The student had, in her own way, become the master, and a new exciting chapter was about to begin.